Beautiful. Well, I have a first question for you right off the bat, and that's because I just looked at my phone at something that I had replied to one of your tweets. You tweeted, I wrote 40,000 blog posts today, and some people had asked questions about that and made some comments. And then I said, did you use Chat GPT? And you responded that that would add time to the workload to use Chat GPT. So my first question is, when you said that you wrote 40,000 blog posts today, what did you mean, given that we all have 24 hours in a day?
So the beauty about content is if you know what you're creating, let's say I'm going to use an irrelevant example. Let's say you wanted to make a marketing page for how to go out there and market if you're a landscaper. And then you wanted to create another one for if you're a contractor, to if you're a real estate developer, real estate agent, and so forth. And let's say the mechanics are all the same for these. Of course, they're not going to be in the real world because each one has its own little nuances. However, if you created a singular blog post and then you took the words and swapped them all out for each other in code, what you could do is you could take all those job titles or whatever they may be and flip them and have them all factor out, have the URLs changed from how to market yourself as a landscaper and change that landscaper to contractor to so forth. So what you're doing is you're really creating one post, but you have to be strategic in what areas you could go out there and change. And you have to you have to create the content based off the changeable elements where you know that they could all change and so forth. Then you could go and create 40,000 different things all at once. Another example for that is, let's say you have a database, right? And you have a database of maybe like 40,000 companies, and you want to create one blog post that addresses any of those types of companies. Then you could interchange that with companies, or you could interchange that with people and so forth. So depending on how everything's set up and the data set that you have, you could customize that one singular piece into multiple pieces.
So you actually meant you did have 40,000 posts completed in a day.
Yeah. Now, when you asked, did you use ChatGPT? So we tried rolling out like descriptions for about 40,000 different firms to see how they would really work out. And there's a company out there called Choreo, right? And Choreo sounds like a choreographic company that teaches you how to go out there and dance. What it is, it's a financial services company. And what ChatGPT would do is it would take Choreo, and since it doesn't know how to match things up and it's not connected to the internet, it would describe a company based off of dance and just hallucinate a result based off of that. Then on the other end of the spectrum, maybe something has a name from a TV show that also has a real name as well. I'll start describing the TV show company and so forth. Like one of the results was like, this company's from the X Files. Scully and Mulder went out there and did this. And when you start to go through all the nuances with the incorrect data out there, when you're doing something that large with, let's say, 40,000 things, then you realize that the man hours that you're going to have to include to go and clean everything up, it's probably more than creating a formula to go out there and do something for yourself where that fits within the mold of everything.
So for people who are listening thinking that there's 40,000 posts that you're creating, I understand now the technical background to that. Where do those 40,000 posts get shown? Are they on one website, or is this for companies that you work with?
They all go on one website. They're addressing about 40,000 different companies, and whatever the language discusses about those 40,000 different places. And that's the interesting thing when you're going out there. If you're looking at like a marketing role, once you could combine marketing with development as well, very few people have like a marketing stack and the development stack together. Like it's next to impossible to find it. But if you're able to go out there and find developers that you could go and collaborate with, it takes what a normal marketer is able to do and kind of puts it on like wildfire. You can just go do a lot more than what you could really do on your own. Like I used to work at a company called the University of Southern California over at their medical enterprise. And when I first started working there, it was about the 5th year of the website being up for keckmedicine.org. And they had about 90,000 page views a month when I began. And I left it around the 5 year point, and the page views went up to like around 500,000 ish. So that took 5 years of working with like a lot of people before we didn't work with any programmers or anything. So it took 5 hard years to go out there and 6x the website. So that web domain existed for 5 years before I was even brought onto the company. So it took them 5 years to go out there and get to 90,000 page views a month. And this month alone, it's September, we're breaking 90,000 clicks straight from Google to the website, all organically, which is kind of insane if you think about it. So that website started in about January. So what's this, the ninth month? And in the eighth month, I think it was like this far under from hitting the 90,000 mark. So it was pretty close there too.
Yeah.
And just working with like developers could really go out there and bring the marketer's potential to an exponential scale. Because if you have a chance to go talk to a lot of different marketers, getting a website to 100,000 page views a month without going out there and using paid traffic like ads or things like that is extremely difficult. It's pretty hard. It's not impossible. There's maybe 5% of marketers are able to go out there and do it, but it's not something that you see quite often.
Well, let's stick with that topic of blogging as an umbrella, I suppose, because I do know that that's one of the ways that you started out when it came to creating content. So before we talk about maybe strategy or how things have changed from then till now, I'd love for you to share the story of how you got into creating posts in the beginning.
So back in about like 2009, 10, 11-ish, like I wanted to do marketing, but there weren't a lot of resources out there that really taught you how to do it online if you wanted to go and learn it by yourself. So most of the stuff I did back then was like connect with people on LinkedIn, post like a service offering on LinkedIn, or use Craigslist and different sources like that to go out there and create things. And but then all the companies I kind of worked with at the time, they went under. Things just didn't really work out for those companies too well, which meant that I had to go and continually look for more and more work to go and make up for all the lost income from all the jobs I no longer had. And it got to a point where things just kind of got rough. I got in between a hard place where I wasn't able to pay rent for about like my electricity bill for about 9 months, maybe six. I think it might have been 6 months. And then my electricity got shut off. I had to go and shower in the dark and everything. So I went and lived with my grandmother for a while, and she helped me like recover from the sadness and depression that kind of comes with not making income and not having a place to live and so forth. And she told me to go out there and look for another job. I did, but it was at another startup where I was underpaid. So I looked for any opportunity I could to really go out there and recoup my stance. And one of my friends at the time, Denise, she was working over at American Honda Motor Company, and she was a manager, and I asked for a job there, and she got me one doing like customer service and everything, which was cool. They paid about 16.25 an hour, 16.24 an hour, and with that, I thought I would get promoted. I thought I would get a better job as time went by. But after about 2 years, I saw my colleagues getting promoted and I wasn't. And if you actually looked at like the numbers for the department, you could see that my numbers were a lot higher than other people. So about 2 years in, I was like, well, I got this marketing and sales background and I'm not really doing something that's really in my background. So maybe I should be doing something else. So I got that desire where you just become like sick and tired of being sick and tired, so you got to go out there and make a change. And there were three things I thought about doing for my change, and I went all in for all of them. One was I applied for new jobs. I applied for 100 jobs, got maybe 3 calls back, but no one hired me, which kind of sucked. I decided, well, if you need to make more income, you got to go back to school. So I enrolled at Glendale Community College and stuck that out. for a long time. And then the other thing I was like, well, if I'm marketing and no one's giving me a shot at going out there and marketing, maybe I should go out there and market myself. And while I'm on the job over at Honda, like reading marketing material, I'm learning more about it because I'm like, I can't do this forever, and I'm taking every single opportunity I can to really go and self learn about the stuff that is out there. And I came across a few people. I went to high school with Neil Patel, who's a very famous marketer as well. And one of the things while I was working there was like, I looked things up and I was like, wow, Neil looks like he's extremely successful right now. What's he doing? Like, we both went to the same high school. We both worked at Knott's Berry Farm. So I started reading a lot of his content to really figure out what he was doing, because I'm like, he can't be that different from me. We grew up in the same places. We did the same things. We also both sold like burn CDs in like high school. So there were a lot of similes that were there. So I started reading his material. There was another guy, Brian Clark. I read his copy blogger newsletter a lot. And James Altucher was also writing a lot on Quora at the time. And one of the things that his content says is go out there and try it, give it a try. What do you have to lose? So at the time, I was like, maybe I'll go out there and write a blog post. So I did. And when I wrote that blog post, every single thing inside me was like in fear. I'm like, people are going to judge me, mock me, ridicule me, call me a loser. I'm just going to close my eyes and click submit. And like for a whole month, like nothing happened. So I'm all freaked out about stuff, and like nothing happened for like a whole month. Then like I'm on Quora one day, I'm like scrolling through like posts, reading them, upvoting, commenting on stuff. I comment on some girl's post. Her name's Erin. She goes out there. She comes back to my page, and then back then they had a promote feature, so she promoted my one post to like 1,000 people, and I don't know if 1,000 people saw it or not. But then just that excitement that she like believed in my content and thought it was worth sharing, like sparked me to go out there and create more content and more content and more content. And as the year progressed, by the end of 2013, I became a top writer on the platform. I had about 2 million reads, picked up about 3,000 social media followers off of it. And the next year, I hit about 10 million followers with about 10 million reads with about 20,000 followers. So the traction just continued to grow, and progressively, I just got better and better at writing. Where at first I was kind of leaning off of like James Altucher's words and Neil Patel's words and Brian Clark's words, but as time progressed, my natural voice started to emerge. So that was pretty cool.
I was creating the newsletter that I send out every Wednesday for today's issue. And the thing I was talking about was Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, and what's good theft versus bad theft, and how we all, if we're going to find our voice, start by copying the voice of others in music, in acting, in writing, in basically everything. And James Altucher sounds like was a good kind of role model and example for you. Right now, it's fall of 2023, and I'm curious if someone else were wanting to get into blogging themselves, would you recommend that they start in a similar way, or what differences would you add to how to get started today versus then?
Is I took like a book, like Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, and I read that book in like maybe a day to 3 days, and like every other book is like on the shelf for like 5 years. I never go and revisit it. So the interesting thing I did was I took I took The Tipping Point and I wrote that book word for word, like I had it on like one page, and I like typed it out word for word, the entire book. And I did this for like maybe like 2 or 3 different like books, and you don't know what's happening while you're doing it. You're just sitting there and typing it out, but subconsciously your brain's picking up, oh, this is where a period goes, this is how to go and emphasize something. So while you learn how to write essays in like school and stuff, does that essay really teach you how to capture someone's heart, to like tug at their emotions, to drive them to do something, to get them to reflect within themselves? Probably not. But when you find an author, creator of a TV show, someone who makes a movie, someone who makes a song, and you go and recreate that, you have those elements and your brain's subconsciously picking up how to do those specific things. So you could go and take that material. Now you don't want to go and post it because it's on your book and that would violate copyright, but you as a learning mechanism, it's kind of brilliant to go out there and take the people who are your role models, whether they're in the writing, TV, musical space or whatever, and crafting what they do. Like what we see Taylor Swift, it says, "Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me." And then you're like, wait, that's kind of brilliant. What could I spin this off to into becoming something that's more relatable to me and my personal self as like maybe a musician or something like that. And then like all these tidbits that you kind of find, they're kind of everywhere. And let's say there's even like a TV show that you love and you want to go out there and one day become a writer for like TV shows. Like if you understand the dialogue that comes back and forth, you and just copy it, like just have the SRT file or the subtitles, just go and type it all out. You'll be able to see the small nuances between one person speaking to another. Now, I can't do that because I never thought about writing a TV show, but if that's what you're into, you can kind of learn from the people who are making the most brilliant TV shows, movies, books, anything out there, and go and use that as a foundation for yourself to go and build your voice off of. Now, what's interesting is you don't want to just use one source. It's better to use about three sources. So if you have three people you look up to, chances are your natural voice is something like these three people that you look up to. And at first, people might be able to see that you're borrowing from these three people. But as time goes by, you'll break off from using those elements that they use and start to emerge more for your natural voice. And then people will be like, wow, it's like X, X, and X if they were all combined together. Like if you hear about like a new emerging artist, like, oh, she sounds like this and this and this. And then that might have been what they were trained off of.
Yeah, I want to tell the listeners that I'm smiling ear to ear because I wish you could have seen me just about 2 hours ago helping a group of teens who want to be filmmakers. And I was asking them how serious they are about it because I said one of the most fun exercises that I love doing is taking a documentary and recreating the storyboard in reverse. So watching the documentary and trying to keep up with just a quick sketch, stick figure drawing, and then noting what type of dialogue exists. So, establishing shot or drone shot, and then quote or music, and then moving on to the next one, interview with, main character. But it's B-roll. It's not them face on. And then I've storyboarded multiple documentaries so that I can see at a glance what that whole show is. And it just, again, there's no real reason to do it other than hoping that we intrinsically start to embed some of that in our own brain so that when we go to shoot a documentary, we can more naturally create a similar kind of thing, or maybe learn what made a period of that documentary boring and things like that. And I think they were looking at me like I was crazy, but we're definitely going to do it if they're serious about it, which I'm sure if you told some people that you rewrote The Tipping Point, that they would think you're crazy too.
I don't know if I've said that to anyone. I might have, but I just remember doing it. The interesting thing, though, is if you watch a movie or something, and if you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like after a certain amount of seconds, you see the video change some shots every single time. And the interesting thing is a TV show has a certain time limit on that versus a movie versus a documentary versus a foreign film. It has a different time frame. So you're like, okay, this community has a longer attention span because they're changing those different elements. So if you're into film and everything and you're a videographer, you can take those elements and kind of tie it into what you're going out there and creating. Now, on the other side, if you kind of look at like TikTok and Instagram, you see, maybe even YouTube, you see a lot of people do those fast edits where they're not going out there and putting those pauses in, but they're cutting them all out, so it makes it look like the person is speaking like one continuous length of text for like 5 minutes, which is kind of insane too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. The other thing in the world of the length of time that I've noticed in the last, let's call it 5 years with documentaries, is so many of them are way too long. At least in my creative opinion, I will watch and be like, okay, this could have easily probably packed a better punch had it been condensed. We didn't have to have 8 hour long episodes. This would have been an amazing 70-minute documentary, and it became a boring documentary about 6 episodes in. But that's a whole other thing. When we talk about creating and getting into blogging, we talked about the 40,000 posts that exist working with a developer. I want to make sure before we wrap the idea of someone starting in blog writing, I know that you've shared as well that you used to create 5 to 6 posts when you were in side hustle mode. So you're still working to set the scene for people. You're still working, but you were starting to post those posts that you're referring to. When you say 5 to 6 posts, like how long is a post, and was it all personal content? Were you like searching for keywords that would do well? What did blog writing look like for you when you started?
So when I started, I mostly used Quora to go out there and create content. And if you're on Quora, you see questions, you see answers. And the great thing about a platform like that is as questions arise, if you know what the answer is or what you believe the answer to be, which I don't know the answer, it's just what I believe the answer to be, I was able to kind of share my opinions on those things. And some people might look at blogging and be like, oh, I got to make a 2,500 word post for everything. Some of my 5 to 6 posts were maybe like 3 sentences, some might be a sentence, some might be 500 words, some might be 2,000 words, some might be 3,000 words. I used as many words as I felt necessary to go out there and create a point. So like one thing out there was like, what's the best quote you've ever heard? And for me, I wrote like, no one is absolutely useless. You could serve as a bad example. And that was all I went out there and put out there, because when you think about a quote, like, can you really add more to it? Do you really need to add more to define what it really means, or is it self-explanatory? Sometimes less is more, and I think in that instance, it is where less is more. Kind of like Taylor Swift's like famous line. Like it's less is more in a lot of different situations. Whereas maybe there's a question on how do you go out there and create a business plan, like while I'm going out there and answering that, for me to write something in 200 words would be a disservice both to me and whoever's reading it. 500 words is probably still a disservice. 1,000 might be as well. 2,000, you might have enough, but that 2 to 5,000 range is probably what the reader is looking for, and probably what gives you enough leverage to stand on to give a credible answer for a question like that. So everything's on a case by case basis. You don't have to knock it out of the park every single time. A lot of my content when I first started out kind of tanked and didn't go out there and hit virality, while something stupid I wrote probably hit like 200,000 reads. So there's always a mixture in between the types of content that you go out there and create. You don't know what's going to hit, you don't know what's not. But as long as you're going out there and doing something, you're continually getting better at what you do.
In today's day and age, well, actually, I'll give you a very specific example because I find that that can be helpful. I have the students I've mentioned who are into filmmaking, and I do have just one, but one who wants to get into blogging. And in the event, like Quora still exists, LinkedIn exists, Twitter and or X exists, and then there's your own website, and there's probably things that I don't even know about. But if, let's say, somebody who was heading off to college, but they wanted to start a blog as well, or blogging as a topic, if you were to tell them how to get started, assuming they could spend, let's say, 2 hours a day on this, would it be posting to Quora only for a while, or like what would be the tactical steps?
So a lot of people in this situation want to go out there and just post on their website. And while it sounds good in theory, it's a little difficult because no one's ever came to your website. No one knows it exists. It's brand new. How is it going to get discovered and so forth? What you do want is you do want a website. If you don't have the monetary reasons or the know-how to go and set it up, you don't want to use that as a limiter to prevent you from going out there and creating the content you want. But at some point, you're going to have to go and and figure that website out. But you don't want to limit yourself to one platform. So now, for example, you mentioned Quora, right? Quora has its own built-in audience of people out there who go and read that content. They could be people from LA, they could be from Florida, they could be from Toronto, they could be from wherever they are from, but they all go out there and religiously every single day visit that platform to go and read 5 things, 3 things, 20 things, whatever it may be. While you're going out there and creating content, if you're putting it onto Quora and you have no audience, what could potentially happen is those other people on Quora could see your content because they live on that platform as well. Now, do you want to limit your efforts to just one platform? LinkedIn has people who are on it all the time as well. So if you post on LinkedIn too, people in that LinkedIn network could potentially see your posts too. Now you have Medium, you have Stack Exchange, and you have all these other places that you could go and post that content to. The more places that you post it, the better, because you have opportunities for people to go out there and discover your content, because as of today, without having written a single post, no one knows who you are. But by posting in these multiple places, a few people here, a few people there, a few people there, start to get to know who you are and start to build, and you get to start building your relationships off that.
And would you recommend that people create kind of like, 5, 6 micro posts, or really spend maybe a couple of days creating a longer post?
So I don't think the amount of posts really matters that much. Like for me, I think it was more like I got addicted to this thing and it just felt more fun than work. Or plus I had, like, at the time I was riding a bus to and from work and walking, so I had free time to go and sit around. And also I would type on my phone while I was like in between calls at work. So I had plenty of time to really like squeeze in the posts here and there. I don't think it's the amount of posts that matter. I think it's just going out there and doing it and sticking to it. One thing that I do see though is a lot of people, once they go out there and create something, they want to go and edit it a lot. And what I find is that in the editing process, a lot of your natural voice kind of gets diminished and washed away. And what people really want is that raw, natural voice, because that's what they're able to connect with, because they see that's the real you and they gravitate towards that more than anything else. And when you kind of remove that, it kind of becomes more of a struggle for people to connect with, because the more structured it looks, the more polished it looks, the more it looks like a company made it as opposed to a person. And like we kind of become tone deaf to that kind of content just as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know one of the things that has been popularized, viral, whatever, about your work was that initial TED Talk. And you mentioned earlier a bit of the story that you share in there about your own journey, struggling, have to move in with your grandma and then kind of getting that job and restarting. And one of the things that I had jotted down was the TED Talk is about leaning into fear and recognizing, identifying, and then facing that fear. I would love to know from you, what is the fear that you are currently leaning into and working through yourself now, because it's been 6 years or what have you since that TED Talk?
So I think fear for everyone changes as each year goes by. Like maybe at first the fear for me was exposing myself onto the internet and letting more people know about who I truly was. And I mean that can be scary for a lot of people because aside from your family and friends, like no one knows who you are. And then all of a sudden, if you put this out there, potentially billions of people can know who you are. And billions of people aren't going to go out there and see it. I might have a collective 20, 30 million views on my content. So if you kind of take that into factor to the world's population, it hasn't hit every single person out there, but a large portion of people have seen it. So that kind of exposure is difficult at the very beginning to kind of get comfortable with. For me, I felt imposter syndrome at multiple times. Like, do I deserve this? Is this what's meant for me? Do people know who I am? And it's like, yeah, they know who you are. You wrote it by yourself. But then like you have like these like challenges with your identity where some people don't feel this. They're like, oh yeah, I'm getting views. This is amazing. But some people are like, what's going on? And it kind of like I don't know, causes a lot of internal turmoil that really shouldn't be there. Nowadays, I guess more of the fear and struggle is kind of along the lines where I was fortunate enough to get married. I just wasn't fortunate enough to stay married. So I'm kind of in that situation where there's fear to kind of lean into, but I'm not really sure what that fear is right now. And it's like a mixture of I think the biggest thing was if you're married or before you're married, you could think about like having children and building like a dynasty or whatever it may be for them and passing down something for them so then they have a good life or whatever it may be for them. But then once your partner is out of the equation, it makes you question, do you want to get married again? It's kind of a lot, even if you're with someone you like. So it's like, is this even going to happen again? So then a lot of those forward thinking pictures and moments, they kind of become a little bit frazzled and it's not as clear as it can be, which I think is okay because when I started out writing, like a lot of people, what they do is they have a goal. Like, I'm going to go out there and get 1 million reads on my content. I'm going to go make $1 million. I'm going to get 100 people to read my book, whatever it may be. Like a lot of people have those goals. When I started out, I didn't really have those goals. I was just like, I'm just going to write something. I just got to do it. I don't know what this is going to turn into. And it just flourished into a lot more than I could have ever expected. And I was pleasantly surprised by it all. But when it comes to, I guess, the relationship side of things and what my future holds, there's some lack of clarity there right now where there was a clear picture before, and trying to get through that isn't as easy as it sounds.
No, I'm sure it can't be easy, and I really appreciate you. And maybe that's a great life lesson as far as personal branding goes as well, that a lot of people struggle with is the willingness to be vulnerable and brave to share something as close to your heart as something like that. I think is a really special example for people to learn from. Now, something that you used to be really strong at, I think are probably still strong at, but is sharing those types of things in posts. Have you shared about that particular challenge?
So I've tried, and like while I'm like creating like a post and it's at like maybe the 3,000 word point, like there's some blocker that's there and I just get stuck and I don't know how to progress through it. So it goes on the back burner and it just gets saved as a draft and it just sits there for about months. So I guess that's what writer's block is. I don't think writer's block is really I don't know what to go out there and write. It's I don't know what my emotions are at a deeper level to really go and get myself to the next phase of what's beyond the words here.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's pretty awesome. I look forward to when it comes out, but I guess it's just staying in drafts for a while.
I'm not sure. I know I feel something, and is it going to open up a can of worms? Am I going to be crying for another half year? I don't know. I'm just like, what's the next step for this? I'm like, okay, it was all good up to this point. Then here it's like, I'm not really sure.
Maybe you'll get 30 DMs and 29 of them will be podcast interviews, but one of them will be a date.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, like I said, it's really just a tremendous example, and I want people to learn from that willingness to be vulnerable and share some real things, especially because I'm sure at a point it was difficult for you to figure out the money side of things. Like, okay, now I'm posting, I'm starting to make some traction, but how do I turn this into a career? And a lot of people get so focused on that, like you said, metrics and KPIs around, I want X number of views, I want this many book downloads, I want this many newsletter subscribers, whatever. um, but there is an element that I can appreciate where people struggle listening to this right now, being like, okay, this is awesome for Leonard Kim to share, yeah, that he had no intentions, but it did work out. When people are struggling with that idea of how to go, I guess, from personal content and random blog writing to turning it into a business, what are some insights that you help people with that?
So the great thing about creating content now is a lot of companies have a rev share program, so you could get paid for your viewership and reads and so forth. Like back when I started, I'm like, oh, I'm just doing this for fun. So at least there's some kind of monetization built into whatever they want to create. Like Instagram will pay you, Twitter will pay you, I think Quora will pay you, Medium will pay you. A lot of these platforms will at least give you some kind of monetary check for doing everything, but going out there and turning things into a business. So when I had a Quora and a Quora alone, it's extremely difficult to go out there and get money from people, because what you are is you're just riding on a platform. That's where the website comes into play. You really need a website, because even if you don't post anything on the website, what I posted on my website was just stuff I posted on Quora that was just copy and pasted onto my website. It gives you that authority that you're doing a little bit more than everyone else. Now, on your website, what you're going to want is you're going to want an about page where you're talking about yourself, your journey, who you are, what you do, and things like that. What you're also going to want to highlight is your content, maybe even a work with letter, work with someone page, whatever you want to do, and kind of talk about the different things that you could go out there and offer. If you're writing, maybe you want to go out there and write blog posts for other companies. Maybe you want to copyright about product descriptions. Maybe you want to go out there and ghostwrite books for people. Maybe you want to ghostwrite thought leadership content for people. There's a lot of different things that you could offer as a writer that could go out there and benefit a lot of different people. It's just what you actually want to go out there and create. Now, you can put those offerings down onto your website. And sometimes people even ask you for things that aren't even on your website for doing everything. So I think about mid 2014, so maybe about a year after I was writing on Quora, someone from, I think it was a company called Axion or something, they asked me if I wanted to write a financial blog post. And I'm like, oh, cool. How much does it pay? And they're like $250. I'm like, wow, it can be $250 for writing one article. This is after like not getting paid anything for a year. Like, wow, this is great. And then I think someone paid me like $500 for another article. The most I got paid for writing a singular article was $5,000, and that came with a free flight, a free hotel, and then I got money to go spend on like restaurants and stuff that I put into the expense bill and everything. So that was pretty cool. So there's a lot of upside potential where, I mean, if you become good, realistically, you can make 500 to 1,000, maybe 2,000. I'd say that's the normal range of what you can make just writing like articles and stuff. 500 is probably more along the lines of things that's written under your name. But if you're a really good writer and you could bring out the story from someone else, for 2,000, you could probably do ghostwriting and just take someone else's expertise and write it under their name. So then they're even more elevated. So there's a lot of different options on what you could do. When I went out there and published my book with McGraw-Hill Business, in the process of that, I worked with a ghostwriter who helped make my book proposal. He charged 15 grand just for a book proposal and not even the book itself. And he tacked on expenses kind of like I did to that hotel company, so I had to pay an extra $3,000 for him to have a hotel and stuff. So you could potentially even do that stuff. But if he had written the entire book, which I couldn't afford at the time, he wanted 120 grand to ghostwrite a book for someone, and he's ghostwritten books for a lot of famous people out there. So a book might take what 6 months to a year to write from just one person for 120 grand. That's not too bad. So there's a lot of potential out there with writing. Also, if you combine writing with like marketing skills, you could drive product sales. You could drive sales for whatever you want to do yourself. You could do your own affiliate. There's a lot of different options out there if you kind of master the communication skills. And I say the main ones out there are like writing, speaking. So with like Instagram, you have to like speak for a lot of stuff now on TikTok. Or if you're good at art and you know how to design, I'd say those are the three main things that people kind of look for as the main communication methods.
You have a very natural and or learned, although I'm sure it's both, ability to take a topic and then roll it into a story and examples that a listener would really appreciate hearing while they're driving in their car or going for a jog, doing the dishes, going for a walk, whatever. So I really appreciate that, because one of those examples that I don't think a lot of people would say is sharing that example of landing the $5,000 blog post. And I'm sure people will really appreciate that, because a lot of people could have listened to this episode and then they think blog writing and they're like, okay, cool. Well, maybe I could make $17 for a post. And then when you say something like that, they're probably like, holy crap. But they're also probably thinking, yeah, but that's not me, because Leonard is such a seasoned veteran in the world of blog creation. So could you just quickly elaborate on, to whatever extent you can, about the story of how that $5,000 post came to be?
So a company that starts with H and ends with T that owns a lot of hotels, said that they wanted to give me an award. And I said, oh, cool, I want an award. And they said, cool, we'll give you this award and we'll also pay you $5,000 for a blog post to write about one of our places. Here's all our places. Which one do you want to go to? I'm like, I'm going to go to that one. And they're like, it's for work, right? I'm like, yeah, it's for work. Because I guess what I think one of their franchises is like the work brand that they have. I'm like, yeah, it's for work. And then yeah, I got my free vacation. I got to stay at the hotel. Any expense I paid for was reimbursed, so I didn't have to pay for anything. I think I racked up maybe $800 in reimbursements, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, so that's inbound then in that case. But had you been doing work for them, or did they see you as someone that they wanted to associate with?
So I don't like outbound marketing. I mean, I'm decent. I'm not really bad at it. I just don't like doing it because it's kind of time consuming. And back before I knew that you could actually write stuff on a website and people could discover it, which is like before 2013 when I wrote on Quora, like back in like the 2009 2010 marketing days. Like I did a lot of the outbound stuff, and it just becomes like tedious the older you get. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore. People should come to me. And then I think 95% of my opportunities I had at the time were inbound, where people. So what kind of ends up happening is, like, let's say you make a blog post and someone goes out there and read it, or they read your, I don't know what a new tweet is, and then they read your ex. That just sounds weird. But yeah, let's say they're reading your content. The next thing they do is they flip over to your social media profile, learn more about you. They click over to your website and they discover more about who you are, what you do, and so forth. But if you have all that process kind of set up right, on your website in your about section, that's the place where people have the opportunity to get to know, like, trust, and potentially even fall in love with you. And if they potentially fall in love with you, chances are they're going to offer you work in some way if you have an offering outside of what they're looking for. Also, at the same time, that's when they're probably deciding to go and follow you on social media or anything else as well.
So what people would call a funnel in some circles.
Yeah, you could call it a funnel. It's a funnel.
Do you call it a funnel?
No.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that terminology either. Um, but I think that being said, it really is a great eye opener, especially for people who are truly talking about the topic of getting into blogging, getting into creating social media stuff for the first time. The other thing that I feel like there's a lot of unknowns where I know people would love to hear about is the idea of doing a TED Talk in general. Like people see them, they're super popular because that brand's so huge. So I don't think I can say the term TED Talk without people knowing what I'm talking about. But I do also know that nobody knows like the process. Like, do you apply to do it? Do you have to submit a script that you're going to say? Like those types of questions. So in general, what was the experience of doing a TED Talk like for you?
So, and first, what you have to do if you want to go out there and do a TED Talk is you have to think about what's a worthy enough topic to go out there and be broadcasted to a TED like audience. Like, am I going to have to, what can I say that either hasn't been said before or that I could say in a way that makes a deep connection with someone that the TED audience is probably going to look for? So, if you have a life event that occurred that you could tie that back into, great. If you have research, then great. If you have some story or something that you saw, great. If not, then you have to go and figure out what this is, which could be a hard part for a lot of people. A lot of these talks, though, are based off of personal experience, though. So, if you're not ready to speak about something today, maybe a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, there could be a potential life experience that could be worth talking about. And the next step is really going out there and applying. Now, almost every single university out there hosts one from like UCLA, USC, UCI to Toronto to Montreal. Like almost every college campus has one, and they usually have organizers, and they'll put out a call for speakers for these. If you want to go speak in India, your likelihood of being an American or Canadian speaking in India is a lot higher of a probability, just because they might want more of a diverse voice from a different country. So you could use that to your advantage. However, you're going to have to potentially cover like flights and all these other things as well. If you don't want to do that, then you have to figure out how to get into your local organization, so you don't have to go and fly anywhere. Like me, I don't think I would fly to go and fly and pay for all my accommodations to do a talk that I'm not getting paid for. Like, seems like a lot. So, let's say I did mine at UC Irvine. What you want to do is you want to look at all the other talks that happened at UC Irvine, and you want to see what kind of things that they talk about and what kind of things that they want. And if your topic fits in line with that, then your probability of getting picked is a lot higher. You could also look for the organizers of that event. A lot of people might be intimidated because they might think that all the organizers are like prestigious people. Some of them may have just graduated college and just like TED. So try to take that intimidation hat off and just go, what if it's a student? It could be. And try to see what you could do to start a conversation and see if something could work.
Do you get to pick your own wardrobe?
I got to pick my own wardrobe, yeah. So, you get to pick what you want to wear. You might not be able to wear some things that are offensive. They do a rehearsal about a month beforehand. So you do your practice talk, what you're going to wear and everything. So maybe if you wear something questionable, they could bring it up at that point. I didn't wear anything questionable, so they didn't bring anything up like that to me. But in actually doing the TEDx talk, it was a little bit nerve-wracking because it's in front of like a few hundred people. The word TED's there, so then it's even more intimidating than if it was just like Bob's house. So um, I was sweating a lot. I felt really jittery. I had to run off to the restroom a few times just because my body was just nervous. And if you actually watch the talk, I think in the first 2 or 3 minutes you could tell that I'm like really nervous, and I'm like, what am I doing up here? But then like eventually, I did practice a handful of times, so I kind of just calmed myself, centered what I was doing, focused on my friend in the audience, and pretended I was just talking to my friend the rest of the time. So that kind of made it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I feel like it reminded me of an athlete who's competing in any sport, individual or team. But having done that many times myself, and I tell people this, they'll get so nervous that they either can't do something, so they have to run from it. The fight or flight stuff kicks in so much that they are not a good athlete because of it. They freeze up. And
Yeah.
it reminded me of that, where it's like, yeah, you can tell that some nerves are coming along, but that is switching into like an inverted U, where your anxiety and nerves are getting channeled into making it a great talk. And that's really what happened. And it, of course, could go one of two directions. You drop the mic and run off stage, or you do what you did, and it ended up being great. Something you talked about in that is, as you mentioned, bringing it back to personal experience that people can connect with. But I feel like maybe a lot of people there couldn't connect with was the idea of suicide and having mental health struggles to the point where you contemplated that. Did you know that that was going to be a central theme of your talk, or did that come up later in the writing process? Like, how important was that to the talk? Because as someone who myself has struggled with those things and mentored many people who have struggled with those things, that stood out to me as one of those moments that connected to your real life.
I would say I probably knew I was going to talk about it just because it's a part of my story and who I am. Because at that time, I didn't know what else to do. Like, hope didn't seem like something that really existed anymore. So there was like no foreseeable future at that time where I just felt like I hit the bottom so much that there was really no way out of it. Luckily, as time goes by, you figure that if you hit a bottom point like that, there's no place to go but up afterwards. But in that moment, like if anyone's in that moment, they can't see it. They just think this is it. This is all I got. There's no reason for me to continue to move forward. And then they're like, what am I going to do? And then I think another benefit is when you think about the execution of it, like a solution that actually, or a problem, something that actually works to do this is really, really hard to one think of and two execute. So then it's something that a lot of people don't actually do, and if they fail, then they regret trying. So then they don't try again. So I think there's some safeguards around that as well. But in regards to it, one thing that I've noticed is my life hasn't been that great in like the past 3 years just because of the divorce and everything. But um, once you kind of get over it, where you're not like, I want to die anymore, and you find some reason to live, even if that reason kind of like isn't the same anymore, like you don't want to do it or think about it anymore. And I wish I knew like what that magic formula was that says this is how you kind of overcome it and never think about it again. But I'm not sure what it is. It's just something that naturally progresses. Like, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, it was supposed to be in there.
The brain's super complex, and I work with youth with the most severe of mental health struggles in our city. So I do see, enough, maybe one annually who goes through with it, but many, 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 all of the others who end up in some form of recovery, so to speak, like you're sharing, that once you get there, it doesn't seem to be as challenging of a problem. And it's interesting that you say that you don't know what the magic formula is, because I was going to ask as a follow up that if we could bottle it, what would be some things that you think might help someone? So you touched on that proactively, but in your own experience, were there certain actions or was it just a matter of patience that you feel like helped you turn a corner?
Well, I know my ex girlfriend said, "Are you selfish? What do you think your grandma's gonna think?" Da 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 da, and things like that. And at the time, I didn't think about any of that. Now I think it doesn't get to that thought because of the things that she said in the past. Mm. Um, I'm not sure. That's a hard question. I don't think I have an answer for that one.
I don't either. And if we did, we would be billionaires.
That's true.
But we would also save the world, so to speak. Mental health is such an important part of the conversation right now that I think, much like any truly difficult topic to talk about that we could just avoid, it's really, I believe, valuable that we just discussed it even at all. So thank you for that. When I was thinking of doing this chat with you today, I have a lot of inbound guests these days. It's not hard for me to book podcasts. Like, it's becoming a popular show, so people want to be on the show. But when I reach out to someone myself and they agree to come on, there's like an extra little bit of excitement. It's probably like blog posting in your case back in the day, if you wrote for a company that you really wanted to versus having someone write you and beg you to do something. And I was excited because, and I was sharing this with my wife, every now and again, there's someone that'll come on the show where I'm like, they're a really good storyteller. They're multi-passionate and good at what they do, and they can carry a conversation. So there's someone that, if time constraints weren't a thing for us, would be an incredible repeat guest. Like, I'm sure the audience would love to have you be on the show like weekly or monthly or at least once every year or whatever. And it's very few, but you fit into that category for sure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. On a side note, my personal connection with all these things that you just made me think of is my brothers, and I lost both my brothers in their early 30s. That's a story for another day, but it's important, I feel like, to give our flowers while we can, you know? And so I didn't really mean to do that. I was just telling you that it's just a fact that you're a great guest for a host to have. So thank you for coming on the show and doing that. Maybe we can do another episode sometime, but I know naturally we have to wrap. And before we do, one of the other things, the main thing, let's call it, that you help people with is personal branding. So we've talked about blogging, we've talked about learning, we've talked about how to create a post. You mentioned the funnel that's not a funnel and monetizing our brands. But when I bring up that topic of personal branding, that's another thing that I think for a lot of our audience, they have a certain perception of it. So how do you define personal branding?
So I think the problem is what it's called, personal and branding. A lot of people associate branding with like Nike and a large company and what they go out there and do. And if you think about what a lot of companies do is they make themselves look cool, superior, amazing, desirable, and so forth. So a lot of people think that they have to apply those things to themselves, but that's not really the case on how it works. It's a lot more basic than that. Now, the thing about each and every single one of us is, Justin, you're going to be here until the day you die. Leonard, I'm going to be here until the day I die. That could be at 80, 90. Who knows how long we could go out there and live. But as long as we're out there, what's going to happen is people are going to associate us with our identity. And with our lack of presence online right now, if you're going out there and just getting started, people have a very small, limited sphere that they could go out there and really judge you by. They might fall across your personal Instagram and judge you by that. And maybe you just have memes on the page. Is that really the presence that you want to go out and put out there in the world? Now, the personal brand's a little personal and a little business kind of mixed in together. It kind of talks about like what you kind of do professionally, but also at the same time brings in those personal elements as well. Most of it's like your personality, your interests, what you like, and things like that. And you kind of tie it all in together. And now, let's say you have no desire to go out there and run a business or anything like that. Having a personal brand helps give you the opportunity to get better jobs in the future, where maybe you're just a marketer to becoming a marketing specialist, maybe a marketing manager to a senior manager to a director to a senior director and a VP to maybe a CMO in the future. Your opportunities like that become a little bit easier as you build a personal brand. And if you're not doing marketing and you're doing finance or anything else, those same career steps apply in those different directions as well. Having a personal brand also opens up the opportunity where maybe a company like Refinery 29, Forbes, Fast Company, whatever it may be, will want to go out there and speak with you, or maybe you're falling onto a podcast like the one that Justin's hosting. All this does is it builds your personal and professional network. You want to build your personal network because then you have more opportunities to go and hang out with other people, discuss things that you like and enjoy, expand your horizons on the world, learn and discover new things, make connections where you could fly to a different place and connect with someone. And you want to build your professional connections as well, because that's what's going to help you grow your income, get more opportunities in the future, and so forth. So while you're going out there and doing that, what you're doing is you're showcasing who you are, your family values, how you were raised, what your family's like, um, some of the things that maybe occurred in your life from like high school, childhood, and so forth. But just showcasing a little bit more about yourself. It's not really going out there and trying to be someone else like a Nike or a Lululemon or a big brand, but going out there and sprinkling who you are out into the ether so that more people get to know who you are as well.
I have an interesting personal timely question that will, I think, help bring value to people as well. And I used to have a personal website. I used to have kind of like a company website. The funny thing is, both of them basically used a digital guise because that was my early versions of like having too much fear to step into my personal name. Now, the podcast is called Just Keep Learning. So we could look at that URL at least as a company URL, so to speak. But what I have realized is that people really appreciate when I show up as myself there. And so I'm trying to just turn that, because I don't care about selling this company ever. It's my like lifelong thing. Can I still show up on that page as a personal brand, do you think?
Yeah, you can. And the beauty of it is your URL is not going to limit you from doing anything. It's who you are. All you have to do is let me pull up your website and just take a look at it one moment.
While you do, I'll share that one of the things I've gotten really good feedback on is, and this is from podcasting marketing experts, that I do a good job of the blog post that associates with episodes, sets our show apart a bit. One of the things that I do is a quick intro about the episode, but then there's always like a little blog posty type thing where it's like Leonard Kim's, 6 tips on how to start a personal brand or what have you. And that's, I think, the awesome thing to leave people with is if you were doing a consulting call and helping them, what would be the things that you share about how to create a personal brand?
So for your personal website, you have the why, who, how, what. What you could do is just really just hash out the who section to really build out more of your personal brand and who you are, to really go into more details about your background and so forth. The why talks about why you have to just keep learning. The how talks about how it works. The who's a little short though. It's about 2 paragraphs and an extra sentence there. You have the only limitations on this page are the ones that you self-impose to yourself. Like there's no character limit that says you have to stop there, or there's no character limit saying you have to go further either. So you can incorporate your personal brand into that element, right? Pretty easily. Also, if you're looking into each of the episodes, you kind of go over everything from the guest bio, memorable quotes, 15 reminders, find your business path, working with trauma, and so forth. You could bring in your personal perspective into each of these things as well and say, I like 15 reminders for live business creators. Audit your influence, surround yourself with other creators. You could put when I audited my influences and I surrounded my thing, and you could put your personal narrative into each of these to put more of your personal brand and more of your touch into what you're creating.
Right. And what I was thinking of doing was like I have posts like 21 mindfulness activities you can do, but you don't know that a robot wrote that, somebody else in the company wrote it, or I wrote it. And that's why I had the two separate sites. But now I'm like, I'm just going to put everything on into this site and I will create personal posts as well.
Yeah, you could do that as well. And then if on your professional site you have a work with you page, you could just put a new tab at the top and set that up, and you're good to go.
Makes sense. I appreciate that on a personal level.
Yeah.
And then, so if you were, again, I have a couple students, they want to get into personal branding, and I'm able to have you sit down with them for a couple minutes and kind of bullet point for them. As this is awesome because I think you're the only person that pulled up the website during an episode, so you see what I mean. But if we made those bullet points of Leonard Kim's personal branding tips, what would they be?
Sure. So the first one would be to what I usually do is, let's say I have a client and I'm working on a ghostwriting project with them and I really want to go out there and showcase their expertise. I'll hop on the phone with them and I'll be like, tell me your life story, tell me about childhood, how you were raised, what your family was like, and all those elements about how you grew up, your first relationship, your first job, the first mishap you had. Did you have an instance where you had an embarrassing moment in school? Just tell me all about that for 1 hour. I'm going to press record and I'm not going to say a single thing unless you're struggling, then I'll help guide you, right? So the first thing would be, who are you? Like, get that 1 hour conversation down. Get a friend to talk it out with if you have difficulty doing it yourself, but get a recording of some sort that goes out there and kind of highlights everything about what you are. The next thing that you want to do is you want to turn that into a bio. So that is who you are. That encompasses everything about you. So next would be probably take that audio recording and transcribe it, turn it into text, clean it up, and turn it into a bio. So a lot of people, what they do is they go out there and create content, but they don't have their positioning set up. The positioning is all about your bio, who you are, and everything like that, because that's what people really need to go and resonate with. They need to resonate with you and get to know who you truly are. So that bio is going to be the most important part. Once you have that positioning down, then you could start going out there and thinking about the different pieces of content that you want to go out there and create. So number 3 would be, in that bio, you probably spoke about 20, 30 different things that you could turn into like blog topics and so forth. Start to go out there and create a calendar, or not a calendar, just a lot of different topics of things that you could really go out there and feel comfortable discussing. You might want to even go beyond that bio and start thinking about other things that you could talk about. Could you talk about influence? Could you talk about certain books? Could you talk about marketing? Could you talk about your favorite recipes? Whatever it may be, start to name off all of these different topics. Next, what you want to do is you want to go out there and figuring out what kind of method you want to go out there and talk about these topics. Do you want to talk about it on camera? Do you want to talk about it through voice? Do you want to write it out? Do you want to draw pictures that encompass it? Figure that out. And once you figure that out, what you could do is you could start to theme out your week. So let's say you could create 5 posts a week. Great. Let's say you could post 3 posts a week. Whatever it may be, you want to start to figure out what your schedule is like. So if you could just do 3 posts a week, maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it may be, dedicate time to make sure that those posts go out on those specific days. And then what you want to do next is, the next step is to make themes for those days. What I like to do is I like to take 2 or 3 themes and put them for a particular day and put them for each day. So maybe some of your topics were like early childhood. Maybe you could talk about a new early childhood thing every Monday. Maybe you could talk about something from like junior high every Wednesday, and maybe something about high school every Friday. And maybe you could put like another team like career tips on Monday, maybe relationships on Wednesday, and so forth. So now you have a structured outline of the different things that you could talk about on different days. Then the next thing would be going out there and working on creating that content so you can post them on those specific days.
Boom. That's our mic drop moment. Let's go. That's awesome. It's so much fun getting into the journey and hearing stories. There you go. There's a topic we could do next time. We could spend a whole hour talking about storytelling. But just hearing those bullet points, I've gotten a lot of feedback that people really, really appreciate them, especially when people are at the point they are in their journey. It's so hard, and this is another thing you do well, for experts to break down for beginners how to get started. And people appreciate those bullet points because it does give you step by step, even though the journey will be a bit esoteric. Everyone will tell their own thing in hindsight, connecting the dots. But when you're first starting, those bullet points are really helpful. So thank you for doing that. I always ask rapid fire themes because then I tie them through episodes. And the first question is, what's one thing that Leonard is learning right now?
How to figure out what to do for the rest of his life.
Not a deep one at all. That's a whole episode in and of itself too. Along those lines, though, I know we've only met on a personal level recently. I've always looked up to your work. If ever you're bouncing ideas or anything, even a voice note here or there, please do reach out anytime because I'm always here for good people. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
if you just want to chat or whatever, I'm here for you, of course. One piece of advice that you would give the next generation.
Well, earlier I said no one's absolutely useless. You can always serve as a bad example. But since I said that earlier, maybe the topic for the next generation is there's a lot of bad examples out there, and you probably don't want to be one of them. So do what you can to really leave a positive impression into the world. One thing that I like to really think about is how could I leave things better than I found them?
Awesome. And one question that you would ask me could be on these topics or otherwise, but going with your gut, something that comes to mind, what would you ask me?
Let's see. What would I ask you? This isn't rapid fire anymore. It kind of slowed down a lot. So, what inspires you to continue to keep learning each and every single day?
What inspires me to keep learning? I have a really big, powerful why, like Simon Sinek said, I think, in that one of the things that I feel like we really struggle with in education formally is helping kids maintain a growth mindset and prevent them from decreasing their creativity. You know, like a lot of people will say the cliche that creativity is the only skill that we lose the older we get. And so for me, I'm, 20 plus years into a formal education career, but through doing this podcast, this content creator life is starting to take over. And I've always been trying to find, well, what's at the center of that? And to me, it's modeling growth mindset. And a lot of teachers will say it, Brene Brown, Carol Dweck, these people have like TED Talks and Netflix specials on the topic, but then nobody really gets to see them learn. So for me, it's a matter of actually trying to put my money where my mouth is and learn things and then share them. The tough thing that I run into is that creating a show like this, it kind of keeps me on the hamster wheel of creating the podcast, putting out blog content, sort of building the business. And then I have a hard time to go do that other thing like learn piano or learn how to sing or learn how to dance, 3 things that I don't know how to do, but I'd love to do them and then roll that into the content, not just because it's good for audience growth or personal use, but because, again, I don't think people can learn or be inspired or feel like they have permission to keep being true growth mindset, lifelong learners, unless they see examples from people who help them feel safe and people that they kind of look up to. So for me, that's why I do it.
What I would suggest is if you want to do things like maybe piano or a different topic, is maybe if you have children or a spouse or a significant other, maybe influence them and say, hey, let's go do this together and see if they might be comfortable in doing it. So then learning things on your own is just not the thing, it's just hard.
It is hard. And for me, that's a great idea because it probably would work for at least a lot of the things, because it's a time management issue for me right now, right? It's when do I have time to do this? Because I would recommend to other people, if you were doing it, you're better off doing 10 minutes a day than 2 hours every Sunday. middle ground is best. Like if I could do an hour every day and manage the time where that is it. And then the question becomes, how do you turn that into content? Because I used to think, okay, I'm going to learn piano and I'm going to share like 10 episodes on a YouTube channel of that journey. But now I'm like, nah, I can't do that. So there's going to be one episode per learning piano. That kind of seems to make more sense.
If I had a son or a daughter, I'd be like, hey, son or daughter, your piano lesson teacher is coming on Tuesday. I'm going to sit with you and we're going to learn together.
Yeah, and that is something that I think I'll do. Again, it depends on the volume of, or the frequency and like the intensity, right? Because if I, in other words, like how long do I learn piano for? Is it like 6 months or is it 6 weeks? And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's like, how much can you learn fast? We talked about Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point. This brings it full circle because a lot of people don't go learn piano because they're scared of the 10,000 hour rule. And so it's more about that. I know there's someone who has a book that I read a while back. I think it was called How to Learn Anything in 20 Hours, Josh Kaufman. And it's that kind of vibe, right? Now, I think 20 hours is too little. It's maybe 100. But then I'd want to switch quick, right? To maybe karate or, like I said, dance, or how to spray paint shirts. Like, and see if I can learn like ideally 40 things between now and the day I die. But
you could also get a personal assistant. Just give them access to your schedule so they know when you're free and how long it takes to get from one place to another, and say, book me stuff.
Yeah, that would
These
be
are
the
some
dream.
ideas.
Yeah, that would be the dream. Like we see, and I used to think about this. I used to daydream like this 20 years ago on the way to work, being like, it'd be so cool if there was a job where your job was to go learn things. Or like go be a firefighter for a week and then go be, but I've never figured out a way to like, I'm always like, well, the monetization piece needs to come first. And then I see someone like Michelle Carre, whose YouTube channel is incredible. And that's exactly what she does. And then, you know, she has millions of followers on her content now. And it's that chicken and the egg problem, right? So if I can figure out the business piece, then that will open up the opportunity to go do the creative piece on top of that.
There's this guy, he went to 50 states and had 50 jobs in each of, or a job in each of the states. Let me see if I can find his name. Maybe he can tell you what he did.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'll definitely check that out. Maybe that'd be even someone great to have on the show.
Yeah, I talked to him a while back. Let me see if I can find it. If not, I could email it to you later.
Yeah, that's fine. The final thing that I always ask people is just where and why people might go to find your work online.
Sure, you can find my website at leonardkim.com. On social media, it's either Mr. Leonard Kim or Leonard Kim, depending on the platform. I wasn't cool enough to get all the handles under one thing, so it's a little fragmented.
That's okay. It shows the journey right at the, building in public, as we like to say for people.
Yep, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing this and taking the time today. It means a lot when we're so busy in the world of creators that you set aside this much of your time to do this. It's really been awesome.
Anytime, Justin. Thank you. I appreciate being here, and hopefully everyone learned something from this, and I hope everyone has a great day today.
I'm sure they will. Ton of value. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
End scene.